Welcome to Channels Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show. Like most of the world, Russia is heading into a deep recession, and the number of high coronavirus infections is rising as fast as the number of citizens becoming unemployed. Could this be a turning point in the tenure of President Vladimir Putin? And the rise of streaming platforms like Netflix and Disney Plus are one of the few success stories within the coronavirus pandemic. But for the rest of the trillion-dollar entertainment industry, culture has come to a standstill. What will the sector look like post-COVID-19? Before those discussions, here's our business correspondent Simon Pusey with a breakdown of the biggest British stories this week. Simon, as always, thanks so much for joining us on the show. It's been a turbulent week, hasn't it, for the aviation industry? Clearly one of the biggest casualties in the coronavirus fallout.
Yeah, definitely. And this has been happening for the last few months and weeks. We've been hearing news recently of some really big airlines, including British Airways, that they were going to cut 28% of their workforce. Well, now it's Virgin Atlantic that have announced they're going to cut 3,000 jobs. That's from a pool of 10,000. So that's about 30% of their workforce. And it says it's also going to end its operations at Gatwick Airport, which is one of the biggest airports in the UK. It's a big announcement. It's a shock announcement. And the pilots union Balfour have described it as devastating. Many airlines, of course, have been struggling across the world with pretty much zero people flying at the moment, and yet they've got to do something with their workforce. So Virgin Atlantic have come under scrutiny and criticism recently for saying they're going to take part in the government scheme to furlough their staff, which means they're going to use government money to pay them 80% of their fees. But even that's clearly not enough. The Virgin Atlantic chief executive said, "We have weathered many storms since our first flight 36 years ago, but none has been as devastating as COVID-19 and the associated loss of life and livelihood for so many." So this is a sector that is shrinking across the board, really. It's not just Virgin. Their Australia operations went into administration a couple of weeks ago, and now it looks like their Virgin Atlantic operation is really under pressure. So it says that their jobs are going to go from across the sector. They don't exactly know whether it's going to be pilots or cabin crew or staff on the ground. It's going to be everyone, really. So we're going to look in the next few weeks and days to see exactly who's going to lose their jobs. British Airways also potentially pulling out of Gatwick. That would be huge for Gatwick Airport. British Airways is their second biggest client. Virgin Atlantic is their ninth biggest, so not so bad, but it's a really tough time for the industry.
It is a tough time, not just for aviation, but for all of us, isn't it? Well, Simon Pusey, thank you so much for your contribution.